What's happening, guys? Welcome to the Kiss the Ring podcast brought to you by our friends at Trophy Smack. This is the #1 commissioners podcast in the dynasty and fantasy space. Now, tonight's topic is how to fill a dynasty orphan. And my guest, well, he isn't really a guest, he's my friend. He is my OG, what my wife calls internet friend. His name is Nathan Pilmer. Now, Nathan is not someone that you would follow on Twitter, although you should. Great Twitter bio. It says, "This is my fifth attempt at a bio, and I'm just out of ideas." If you've ever listened to the GOAT District podcast and listened to the leagues that JD, Dan, Theo, myself, Jerry, my co-host on the Dynasty Warzone, that we play in, this is the mastermind. This is the guy who keeps it all together. Not only does he keep the money right, the attitude right, he keeps the league going with trades, but I could tell you all kinds of good things about him, but I'll let him introduce himself. Nate, man, it's been a long time, but welcome back to the podcast airwaves.
It has been a long time, so thank you for extending the invite out. I feel like I need to keep my fantasy podcast muscles a little bit limber here. So happy to return here with you, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm excited to have you. And for those that want to go way back, like pre-Dynasty Warzone, I guess the original GOAT District hosts weren't Dan, JD, and Theo. It was me, Nate, and JD from the GOAT District. And now it's Dan, JD, and Theo, but that's how long we've known each other. And I wanted Nate here because he's being very humble. He's being very I think humble's the right word. He's being very humble. Nate runs tremendous leagues. He is a fair, no bullshit dynasty commissioner, but Nate keeps it fun and Nate keeps it light. So I don't want to waste any more time putting Nate over or talking about how great the GOAT leagues are, although they are. I want to take like literally 60 seconds to tell you about our friends at Trophy Smack. So Trophy Smack is the sponsor of this podcast. And if you play in a great league, like the GOAT leagues, like the Dynasty Warzone patron leagues, the Podfathers patron leagues, you want to have a trophy. You want to have a great trophy. You want to have one of those trophies you can be proud of. Or if you're doing a startup, maybe you're going to do a redraft league and you need a draft board to put on the wall. All of these things are available at Trophy Smack. And if you spend $100, that's subtotal, not tax, not shipping, but $100 before all of the other stuff, you can get a free bling or stunner ring by using the promo code Underworld. And again, you should be doing these things anyway, especially if your league is of any age. Even year one, consider a good trophy and consider Trophy Smack. That is our sponsor. Use promo code Underworld to get that ring as long as your subtotal is $100. Or you could just go to trophysmack.com/Underworld and it will take you right there. So, Nate, let's get into this, man. Let's get into how you replace a dynasty GM in a league. Now, but before we get into that, so Orphans, Nate, is there anything tougher for you as a commissioner in a dynasty league than filling an orphan?
That's a hard no. That is easily the hardest thing to do as a commissioner because, there's just too many reasons for why people leave dynasty leagues these days, anyways. But for the most part, being the commissioner is like you're a commissioner because you enjoy the game, you enjoy the people you play with, and you want to make sure that it's going to be as long lasting as possible. And if you're going to be a commissioner, I guess you should trust yourself the most to be able to try and make that happen. So everything else is just part of the fun here. I don't really call it work because, I get to talk with all my buddies every day about fantasy football. Who doesn't want to do that? Orphans are an unfortunate reality with having leagues here. And it seems like this year was the hardest. Probably because I'm in more leagues than it was the year before. I'll probably say this again next year. There's just more leagues to cover. And I try to be as much help as I can. So I am definitely commissioning more than I was last year. So it's just an inevitability. You have to deal with orphans every now and then.
And I would say that the league that, you and I, because like I've pared down my non-Dynasty Warzone patron leagues. I'm in a handful. I'm still in 2 of the GOAT leagues. I'm in the original Super Flex League, and I'm in what we call the Big Money League. It's the highest buy-in of the leagues. And that's why I referenced the buy-in. Would you say, and I think it kind of goes without saying, that the higher the buy-in, the harder it is to find replacement owners, especially if it's an orphan, and the uglier the orphan, the harder it is to find a replacement?
Yeah, there is one positive aspect to the higher stakes leagues, but I think we can touch on that later. But definitely the biggest issue these days for orphans that are in higher stake leagues is no one's going to be looking at a team that they have to know that they're going into rebuilding it from year one, maybe year two, into taking it over, and knowing that this is probably going to have to be like a donation for the first year or the next year after that one. Just realistically looking at it, because most people don't leave winning teams. This just doesn't happen. So when you have an orphan team to take over, you have to expect to put in the work and try and rebuild it year one and hopefully be competitive year two. And that's just really hard to swallow for a lot of people when you have a higher buy-in.
Yeah, and we're going to get to some of the workarounds that, I don't take credit for everything that I do with someone else. JD, Nate, and I actually created. It's a separate topic for a separate GM commissioner show, but we created what I think is the best trade deadline in all of Dynasty. We shut off trades just for the playoff teams in our leagues. So if you're out and you still want to be in action, most of our leagues are 12 GM leagues. So if you finish 12th through 7th, you can trade all you want. It's just that Nate changes the settings to commissioner approval instead of automatic approval. And then as teams are eliminated, he turns it back on. I think that allows you keep the trade juices going. And something else that Nate and I created is how to get replacement GMs for your orphans without having to affect the money. We call that a tease here in the industry. We're going to tease that ahead for later in the show, because I think Nate and I have created some really, really useful things to help keep leagues alive without having to spend a bunch of money. But Nate, what do you think causes orphans more than anything else? Now, in the show doc I sent you, it's like, do you think it's bad draft strategy? Do you think it's going all in, taking that big swing and a miss, burning up all their future picks? And I know some cases it's real life, it's work, it's family, it's kids. I can speak from personal experience with, being a youth sports dad. It can take up a lot of your time. The older the kids get, the more time the sports take up. So what do you think is, if you were to rank those things, what do you think are the things that really hurt the leagues the most and create the most orphans in the dynasty leagues that you've played in?
Yeah, I can easily say from experience, strictly from this year, I think mostly everything is issues that are beyond the commissioner's control. I think especially everything you just said, it's bad strategies, ending up with bad teams, trades that didn't pan out, and you're looking at teams who are like, oh, I'm just tired of paying you guys every year because this isn't fun for me, and I'm just gonna bail out. I'll join a new one. Those most suck, but they happen, so you gotta roll with it. But I think the most common one I've seen this year is just overexposure. People are telling, this is what I'm being told. I think they could be letting me down easy if they don't want to be like, sorry, I just don't like this league anymore. But I think most of the time is people say, I got to cut down on leagues. It's too much. I'm trying to set up lineups in 12 leagues, and there's last minute injury updates Sunday morning that I don't catch, and I'm starting a player that's been injured. And it's also just like I said, real life. This is a hobby, but we like to add the financial aspect to it, and it just adds that little juice. So sometimes it gets too much to carry. So my advice as a commissioner, and this is coming from me, and Randy, me, is it's difficult to avoid the startup every year. I love doing it. I love startup.
Oh, yes, sir. Every year. So I'm going to give Nate a second, but every year I love this man. I mean, like I said, Nate is more than a league mate after 6 or 7 years of playing Dynasty. Nate's a friend. But every year, Nate's like, it's like literally like halftime at the Super Bowl, and Nate's in the group chat going, who's thinking about startups? That's Nate. He loves a good startup. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, but yeah, you do love a new Dynasty league. You have to add at least 1 or 2 every year.
You know what? That's been, I don't think I'm alone on that, to my defense. So, but I do think I do have a bit of a problem when it comes to startups. It's really hard to say no. I do try to not to be the one that pushes it. I think I've done really well this year. But if you're a commissioner who is experiencing these mass exodus of GMs this year, you got to take it upon yourself to not be someone who adds to the head count of people who have like more than enough teams to deal with, because at some point it just becomes too much for multiple reasons. So that would be the only thing. But like I said, there's a lot of things that are not within our control, unfortunately. But yeah, I think the things you noted were pretty much the norm. Is just I hate being the donator to a bad team, to a league that I'm not going to win for a while, so I'm just going to leave and hopefully get another startup. And in addition, speaking of startups, when you leave a league, you justify to yourself, well, now I can add a startup, you know. So
yeah, that's a bad one. Is like someone said, "Hey, I need to cut down my dynasty exposure. I got to cut off 2 or 3 teams," and then you see this person tweeting out startup, picks from Sleeper
every time.
Every don't be that guy. It's okay. It's okay to say, "Hey, you know what? My kid picked up travel basketball this year. I just can't set all those lineups on Sunday morning because basketball is played in the winter. I don't get great reception in the gym." Okay, that's fine. But don't let me catch you 2 months down the road in a startup, because you know what you're doing. But I do want to bring this up. I just want to bring this up real quick because I see it in the chat, and thank you to PJ for bringing this up about collecting dues. Now I know you have implemented, because I've had to pay you. You have implemented a pay your futures dues if you move a first. You've also done it to where you pay 50% because you are trying to at least create that enticement. But we'll talk about money here, in the back half of the show. Mm-hmm. But do you find that is, a dissuader of trades? Like, does it slow? Because you do a really good job of that. Like, I think you do an excellent job of getting the money, but keeping the league active, and there's still first being moved, and you're still getting the future dues, or at least half of it. Do you find that to be like a job in and of itself?
So yeah, and you're speaking to our one of our higher stake leagues that we feel like we had to do that because it was a higher stakes league. We wanted to avoid the situation where someone had just went all in year one and ditched it and left this complete dumpster fire of a team, whether or not they won or not. Because I had seen it in the past. So that was the general idea with it. I think what we're trying to do moving forward here is, because, like you said, that it could mitigate the amount or the incentives to trade. And as again, me, that trading's 90% of the game. I mean, it makes most of this thing fun, outside of winning the damn thing. But so I don't want to put anything in place that will limit that. I think the best path forward has been to just get the next season's payments up front, and in some leagues, especially the higher stakes leagues. I don't want to have everybody get hit all at once. So I try to do maybe like half now. So you're paid up through the current season and you've paid half. So instead of just wait till I see you trade, I've already got your half up front. And then when you come to next season, it's a little less of a hit on the buy-in front, because you've already paid that half up front from the previous season. Because honestly, it's just a logistical nightmare for commissioners to try and hunt down everybody who's tried to make a trade, got a trade done, get them to pay their fee for the year up front. If they don't do it, then within a certain time frame, the league rules say that you have to reverse the trade. And then it just becomes a bigger mess than a solution at that point. So the halfway point is just to ask for at least half of the following season up front. And I think that was a fair middle ground.
Yeah, and that's the one thing too. So Nate, again, he commissions a lot of different leagues within the same group of 20 to 30 guys. I don't think we have any ladies in there, but Nate does a great job. And this is a little side nugget for all you Dynasty commissioners. If you commission multiple leagues, Nate does not do all 6 or 7, whatever number of leagues he commissions within the GOAT leagues. He'll do one in like right after the NFL draft, and he'll collect all the money for that one. Then he'll wait 2 weeks. He'll do another one, and he staggers them, which allows everybody to, especially if you're working on like a limited bankroll and you just really can't afford to come up with $300, $400, $500, $600. And that might be right. One buy-in for some leagues. It's not for us, but Nate does a good job of spreading that out. So that's a good nugget for you as well. Don't blast through everything, because not only that, I think Nate also has realized that it keeps the action going. It keeps it revives the chat for a much longer time than if you did like all 6 drafts at once. So take that nugget as well. Now, Nate, we'll get you back on later in the summer, but as a commissioner, when would you prefer that a GM tell you that they're going to bail? Would you prefer right as the season's ending with like maybe 1 or 2 games left, maybe as the playoffs are going on? Definitely right before the rookie draft, in my opinion. But if you're just a dynasty gamer who's listening to this and maybe not a GM, first of all, thank you for listening. But Nate, when would you tell those people that are not commissioners but are listening, if they're going to leave a league as a commissioner, when would you like to know when people are leaving?
As soon as possible. The earliest the better. Ideally, as soon as the season ends. Honestly, because it's going to be difficult to find someone to be interested in taking over a new team in the middle of all the rookie drafts. So if you leave a league in between April and June, guys are getting their fix doing the rookie drafts. That's just a given. And if it happens too far down the road, I don't think it's anywhere between January and March, and I'd say July itself, I think are fine. I think I could find someone in 2 months before the season starts. But ideally, it's before or after the rookie season, because I need to find someone who's hungry to take over a team. If it happens during rookie season, they're preoccupied with whatever they've got going on. And I know with most people playing Dynasty these days, they've got more than a handful going on. So ideally, just let me know soon, because I can ask league mates to help recruit. We can look into other options in filling the teams, and I think we'll speak to that later. But yeah, I'd rather not sit on it. And for me, Dynasty is 365, 24/7. So I don't go on hiatus because it's the off season. That's
no. Nate has definitely hosted drafts while on vacation with his lovely wife. He's been like in Las Vegas or LA or wherever, and Nate's still in the group chat. He's like, "Hey, I've had 6 beers. Great time to send me trade offers." Nate is the kind of commissioner and league mate that you want, but he's absolutely right. And I think because if you give your commissioner enough time, I think the carrot on the end of that stick is the rookie draft. It's like, hey, here's the rookie draft. It's going to be a great time to come in. The league's going to be active. You can make some trades. You can make some moves. You can start doing what you got to do. Even if you leave in February, again, that leaves, Twitter's a hell of a thing. It's going to allow you to recruit. Everybody knows somebody looking for a league. Everybody has listened in the case of the Dynasty Warzone patron leagues. You've listened to the Dynasty Warzone. Maybe you'd want to be in a league with Jerry, myself, etc. You've listened to the Goat District podcast. Maybe you want to be in a league with Theo and Dan and JD. So there's always ways to do it, but giving your commissioner ample time to start looking, because you just don't want a replacement, right? Like if you got a divorce from your wife or, she left you, you wouldn't look for the first replacement possible. You'd like to take, at least some people don't, but you'd like to take a little bit of time to see what's out there, get back in the game and not put yourself in a bad spot, because a lot of times you could just be chasing that rebound GM, and it could do a lot more damage than actually helping.
Sure.
So last question before the break, Nate, and then we'll come back and start putting out some ideas. Now, John McGlynn was on the show with me last time. John commissions a lot of live leagues in the Chicago area. If you're in the Chicago area, look John up. He'll put you on. How do you communicate that you're losing a league to your league mates? You just come right out and say, hey guys, Billy Bob, Johnny Jack, whoever are leaving the league and we're going to have to find a replacement. How do you communicate that downstream to all the GMs in your leagues?
Well, when I ask for people to let me know ASAP, I return them kind to the league. I think it's really important to let everybody know, because it's actually to my benefit for the reasons that you noted, because I want to have as much help as possible as GM, specifically when we have so many leagues together. I will take any help I can get and find the right people. Plus, I trust the guys that I know that I'm in the league with to do the vetting as well, because they're not going to bring in someone that doesn't gel well with the league. And yeah, we want to make sure we're not selling for just a body, specifically in our leagues and in the higher stakes leagues above all else too. So yeah, I need to let everybody know quickly. Everybody's got somebody in mind who has been waiting to get in a league, and I think the leagues that we're in is kind of highly coveted. So it hasn't been too hard to do so. There were some teams that were harder to fill than others because of how they were left, but some weren't, and that was because of the league mates we're in. So I let them know ASAP, and they're invested in this as much as I am. So I do thank them for their help, and I welcome it at any time.
Yeah, I think you said something there that's really key. You know, a fixer-upper in Orange. Now, Nate, for those that don't know, Nate used to live in Orange County, and he had one hell of a commute. But Nate, Orange County real estate is at a real premium, right? So if you're going to have a fixer-upper, I'd rather have it in Orange County than Sacramento or Oakland or somewhere else, just because it's still California. You're still getting that West Coast lifestyle, but Orange Beach property values are going to maintain the value of a good league. And even though you're rebuilding a league, and I'll just share a couple of the really good leagues I'm in, like the GOAT leagues, trade addicts leagues. Those are great leagues. So those in themselves have value. And I'll tell you what else has value. That's the world famous, in quotation, draft kit. So we've talked about how orphans get created, you know, some of the ways of communicating that to your league. And we come back, Nate and I are going to give you 3 fixes that can potentially help you fill an orphan, some at really no cost to you, the commissioner. But real quick, we want to share a word with you about the world famous, in quotations, draft kit. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's the Podfather of great news. The 2023 draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated areas, and that one dynamic for each team that you need to know when making decisions on draft day. And we added a bunch of features. I mean, individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, also brand new this year, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league, do's, don'ts, tips, and what the more innovative fantasy commissioners are doing this year. That's presented by Trophy Smack. The whole package is presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the FFPC, Ray Garvin, Derek Brown, the best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. Playerprofiler.com/draft kit. Playerprofiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
And there you go. You know, Jerry Jones once had a famous saying that really stuck with me when they were doing budget overruns on Dallas Cowboy Stadium. They asked him, Jerry, you know, what about these overruns? And Jerry Jones looked the reporter dead in the eye and he said, nice things aren't cheap and cheap things aren't nice. If you want to get a cheap draft kit, you can certainly find one. If you want to get a nice draft kit, you'll head over to Player Profiler and you'll get that draft kit. But Nate, speaking of money, it's one of those weird subjects in America, at least, that, you know, when the money gets funny, everything gets funny. But one thing that you do is you've always done a good job. Nate has extremely big integrity. I will say that for him, even though he's here. I'll say nice things about him. Nate's integrity is above board. I know that when I give Nate Pilmer my league dues, I know I'm getting paid. That's important. But one thing Nate Pilmer does not want to do is come out of his pocket because you couldn't get a league. So we in the past have had these conversations. These are real conversations Nate and I have had as I'm stuck in traffic. Nate works from home. I'm like, hey, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm going to call Nate. And I'm going to say, Nate, let's talk. Maybe sometimes we get a trade done. Maybe sometimes we just shoot the shit for, 45 minutes, whatever it is. But as a man who's lived in LA, he understands the pain of being in traffic congestion and needing someone to talk to. So Nate's always been there. But Nate, I think the first option, and to me, it's usually the best option to filling a Dynasty Orphan, is a dispersal. I think this allows any other GM in your league that maybe had made similar mistakes to the GM that created the Orphan. I think it allows them to get like that potential redo. Now, typically you need at least 2. The more the merrier. I think this is the 101 of fixes is the best way of saying it. And that's my thing. What are your thoughts on dispersal as like the first option? When you find that new GM, you're like, hey, we vetted this person. He or she is the right person for our league. We want them in. We want to indoctrinate them into our leagues. Do you think dispersal is the 101, and how do you handle dispersals?
I 100% agree. That is, it's my preference to offer that out initially when we have the opportunity to fill an orphan, for several reasons, really. I mean, even if you're in the league itself, whether you're participating in the dispersal or not, you can still participate from the outside. You can trade into the orphan. So it's not just for the guys who are involved with throwing their team into the player pool. Now, I'm sure everybody is aware of what a dispersal draft is, but essentially, just to kind of, long story short, is what you're going to do is you take every team that is going to be in this orphan dispersal league, and then you put all their players and draft picks into a player pool, and you set up a draft order one way or another, whether it's random or however you want to do it, and then the people involved get to draft like you would a normal startup. And like I said, I think everybody loves a startup. It's period. Loves to draft in any way whatsoever. So if you can add a draft aspect to it and fix an orphan at the same time, this is always going to be my first preference because, like I said, everyone, including the people not in the orphan dispersal, can be involved. It's a little bit of work as a commissioner, as you do need to adjust. You have to take all the players off the team, from whatever format you're doing, whatever platform it is. And then you have to set up an Excel sheet to do it. It's a process. And if anybody wants some help to doing that, I'm happy to let them do it. So don't talk about, because it's a process, but it is worth doing without question, just simply for the reasons we stated. It solves several problems, and it's fun, and it's drafting on top of it all. I would prefer to do that. It's not always the case. It's hard to get people sometimes to give up their team. You're not convincing anybody. They have to do it willingly, but that is the problem. Is first you got to get at least one team, preferably at least 2 other teams in addition to the orphan team, to make a worthwhile dispersal. So once you get to that point, yeah, I mean, I'll do that every time.
Yeah, I love a dispersal. If I'm going to do it, I want a dispersal because of this reason. A, it does make the league much more sellable, and that's what you're trying to do. That's why I consider it the 101. Because if you haven't collected the league dues for that league, that makes that new GM's decision to join much more palatable. Because what are you selling? You know, Nate's in sales. He'll tell you benefits, features tell, benefits sell. And the benefit of being in a dispersal is you get a draft twice potentially. Yeah. If you do the dispersal draft in, like, say, April before the NFL draft, and you can put in whatever draft picks you have in there so that you can draft the draft picks too as part of it, that makes it so much more fun. You're right. You need at least one other GM to say, yeah, I'll dispersal. And I think entering a dispersal for a lot of people is a matter of pride. It's hard for a lot of people to say that I've butchered this. Fair. But you know what? You got me. I got you into one, and you got me into one, and it ended up being some of the best teams that I've ever had is getting in a dispersal, because I think you and I were the 2 new members, if I remember correctly, and you and I basically drafted like heads up between each other. Now that league has since folded. We couldn't save it, but that was fun.
True. Yeah. You're instead of looking at this one team that's an orphan for a reason, you're looking at a pool of assets that you can basically make your own. So it's a startup without having to do a full startup. I know that's the ideal portion of it, but hey, not everyone's offering a startup. And then some leagues are more coded than others based on the people who are in there. So if you want to get into a certain league, this might be the best way to doing it for everybody, all parties involved.
And I have found, I've only done it in one other league, that much like the NFL draft, Nate, you know, when the NFL does an expansion, which they haven't done in a long time, but every team can only protect so many players. I kind of do it the opposite way. Every GM has to throw in at least 2 players. So it may be, if you have a 25-man roster, it may be players 24 and 25, but it at least adds a little bit of flavor. It could be the shittiest steak in the world, but that could be the A1 that makes it palatable, is by throwing in 11 times 2 is 22 somewhat more palatable players.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gets everyone more involved. I think, like I said, for me, it's the 101. I think you agree.
Yeah.
But these last two things, these are the things I really brought you on, because I think these are fixes that you and I literally, conversation in the car, stuck in traffic, that I think these are some of the fixes that you ended up implementing in our big money league. And I think it worked out really well, because Nate did a tremendous job of communicating this downstream to the other GMs in this league. And what he did is we took the concept of just adding additional picks into this year's draft. So the team, because much like many orphans that you find in dynasty leagues, they were pretty pick starved. There was not a lot of picks on this roster. There's like a fourth and a fifth, and we're talking 25 players, 12 GMs, tight end premium, must start 2, and this thing was rough.
Mm-hmm.
So Nate and I just talked about the concept of, hey, what if, to get money, to get, hey, at least pay half the dues this year, but we're going to add a 1, because this is another great Nate twist. We always give a 113, the 13th overall pick, for whoever wins the toilet bowl, because you got to play for something even when you're not playing for the money. So I love that. But Nate, you added in like a 114 and a 115, and you may have added in second round picks, and you just had to explain. I'll let you explain it, but you just had to explain to the other GMs, hey, this is the decision that I've come to, and talk about that conversation we had and what you ended up doing in our big money league.
Yeah, so this was a discussion that you and I had one day, and this was after at least a month of searching. This is our higher stakes league, and this is why it's harder to find people in the higher stakes leagues when the team is so devoid of draft capital. And this team had decent assets. Don't get me wrong. It had, I think, had Eckler on it. I think it had Tyreek on it. But I think in Dynasty, I think it's easy to say, and I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that, youth is the biggest value pusher when you're trying to incentivize a new owner. So when you don't have the youth in the player market, and not only did this team not have a draft pick before the 4th round in the 2023 draft, it didn't have a pick before the 4th round in 2024. So you're looking at 2 seasons in a higher stakes league of skating uphill. It's going to be so difficult to do that. So ultimately, after just saying, yeah, I am in sales, I could not sell this team. It had to be incentivized. So yeah, you and I spoke, and it came up to an idea about saying, hey, listen, we have 2 options here. This is me talking to the league here. The 2 options are, we have to really incentivize the new owner coming in here, or there's a potential that this becomes an 8-team league or a 10-team league, which ultimately I think we still might have done, but I don't think it's the ideal thing to do. Or it could have even folded because there would be people who don't want to do that. So the alternative was, we're going to just straight up give this new team offer. We're going to offer them the 114, the 213, and the 313. And if that didn't go that way, then we'd offer another first next year. And if that didn't go, then we look into discounts on the buy-in. Thankfully, we have a league GM who has a good buddy who brought him in, and we didn't have to go too far down that route. He's already a great guy. He's made a ton of moves to already rebuild, but he showed me the response saying, okay, if that 114 is in play, I'm in. And it was literally, that was the main reason for why he joined. For no other reason, the draft capital itself, and on a very old team, was what gave him the nod. And we didn't have to go too much extreme to get him incentivized. So yeah, there are ways to get to people to join. But when all is finished, you really got to get creative, and you have to make certain sacrifices. And honestly, I mean, this draft was okay. So I don't feel like the 114 is going to be too much of a value tilt for against the league, or the late second. So I think this was a reasonable outlet.
I think it was great, and like you said, the only other solution you and I could really come to was, no, I have a team in this league, and Jerry, my co-host from the Dynasty Warzone, he has his own team. The other thing that we talked about was we didn't want to, but if we couldn't find number 12, Jerry and I could just pick whichever one of our two. It would be my team because my team's way better than his, let's be quite frank. But we would have kept my team, and then we could have, spiced up the rest of the remaining 10 teams by throwing all of the assets in Jerry's team into the rookie pool. So basically you could draft rookies or veterans. And that would have spiced up the draft, but you don't want to play. I mean, I don't want to play in 10 GM leagues. I like 12. I love the format.
I can avoid it, but yeah.
And I'm not saying it to put myself over and pat myself on the back that I'm so virtuous and I'm so great. It was just, this is the conversation Nate and I had. I said, hey, this is an option, is that Jerry and I could drop down to, one team. We'll co-own a Dynasty Warzone team, and then we'll spice up the draft with the 10 remaining. We were trying to avoid that because, Nate, I think you agree, you like 12-man leagues, 12 commissioner leagues.
Yeah.
I want to make it abundantly clear. We like playing Dynasty fantasy football and any fantasy football with the ladies. They're usually better than us because they're better planners, but different conversation for a different day. The other thing that when we ultimately agreed before Nate, because Nate's a much better communicator to the league than I am. I can be a little gruff, as my wife and son say. I took it on the chin kind of worse than anybody because I had traded Cooper Kupp in that league for the 112, the 201, and a future first next year. You remember the trade that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And what that did by adding a 114 and a 115 is that made the gap, because I knew there was a 113. There's a 113 in all of Nate's leagues.
That 201 is one setback. Yeah.
And it added in two more players. There was a gap. It didn't matter to me. I was willing to work with Nate in whatever it has. And that's where, as a commissioner, you've got to kind of know the room in which you're in. If you got a bunch of cantankerous people that complain about everything, that may not work. But these are just solutions. And that didn't cost you a nickel, right? It didn't cost the league a nickel either, correct?
Correct. Right. We didn't have to do any concessions on that.
Because this last bullet point is the hardest bullet point to take. So the last option for me, again, the 101's dispersal. Get some of those other shaky rosters in there. Maybe balance the force a little bit. Let's get everything spread out. So instead of having one, really shaky team that you're trying to get covered and two that could be potentially happening down the road, you can kind of get all those guys or ladies nudged together to create, a dispersal. That's my first option. Adding some rookie picks, adding some draft capital into an orphan that doesn't have any. Yeah, it's going to take some charity from the league to add that in. But Nate, you didn't have any issue with that on MFL because we did it on MFL as opposed to sleeper.
Right.
So no issue there. This third one is the one that's the toughest. This is, because to me, it's truly a punishment to the existing league members. Is that you basically have to give if you didn't collect those dues. Now Nate does, but maybe you're in a league where you didn't collect those dues and you didn't get that money for future firsts that were traded. Happens to all of us, lesson learned. But this becomes the punishment to the existing people. You're basically giving that new GM a free year. Again, unless you've invoked that rule that you have to pay, which we do. But this creates things like I said, shorting the pot. Maybe you have like a third place prize that pays out, like your entry fee back. Like if the entry fee is $50, then third place is $50 and you broke even on the year. You got to play for free that year. Or maybe you have a $50 prize or whatever for the team that scores the most points. You may have to make that go away for a year or two just to entice someone to do it. So that's the route that you don't want to go. Nate, So what do you think about discounting league dues? And as a commissioner, have you ever came out of your own personal pocket, maybe winnings, to help, get a pot right and to get a league back on track?
The only time I've come out of pocket is when I've mishandled the funds or let me put it this way. Since we would have to collect funds at a certain point, the cost of the leagues are estimated. So if I just messed up on what I asked people to pay for, there was one year I just ate it. This current year I did it again, but this goes back to not settling for league mates. You wanted to have the best of the best, and we have the best of the best. And I asked people for help, and this went into every aspect, knowing that I'm fallible in math. And I asked everybody, hey, I asked you for the buy-in, but not to pay for the league. Can everyone send me another $5 each? No question. Everybody said, yeah, don't worry about it. There was that issue, but I've never had to take it out of the pocket. Every decision is made through the mutual and majority agreement of the league that you're in. And with things like this, it's the last resort you want to go to. You don't want to take any money from the people who have put the time in and the effort in to build a team, a championship, and get to the point only to be like, sorry, we have to take a little bit off the top coast for whatever reason. But this is the one example where I said in higher leagues, it's actually better because when you're doing discounts on buy-ins, the structures that you're getting paid out are like sometimes $600 for first place or higher. But when you're trying to discount one, maybe two teams, you're looking at maybe 8% taken off the top. So if you're winning 600, you probably are from last year's spot. This year's spot will probably be like 575, and then second place is down $10, and third place is down $5. Whatever we end up doing. So it's barely a dent. So when you're looking at the end game here, okay, I won 575 instead of 600, but the league survived, and I get to do this again next year, and we're back to normal because we get the league going. So again, last resort, not ideal. Not only the third option I want to propose to the league about trying to get an orphan filled, but it's A or B, man. You either come up with an alternative or you don't, and that league just dies. And at 99.99%, that league is going to want it to keep it going, and we'll suffer, a small dent in the players pool or the prize pool.
100%. And I've always believed in the philosophy that compromise is the soul of good business. Everybody's not going to always get their way in a deal. Again, I mentioned Nate's in sales. I deal with salespeople in my real job. And working with people to come up with an amicable solution that benefits everybody in the long term. Yeah, someone's going to take it on the chin in the short term, because that's just the nature of missing out, and having things fall out, because you don't ever want to lose a GM. I didn't invite you, or Nate didn't invite you to join in a league with us so that we hoped you left in a year. We didn't hope that you spent, all summer, drafting a team and then going through a rookie draft and then hanging out in the group chat for a year and meeting a bunch of good people just so we can say goodbye in 12 months. That's never the intent. So these are some of the things that we've put together to help keep our leagues intact. And Nate, I will say now, after 6 years, and one step. So let me put the GOAT leagues over one last time as we're wrapping this thing up. I'm in several industry leagues. And when I say industry, I mean industry. I mean Dynasty Nerds. I mean Dynasty Happy Hour, Dynasty Trade Calculator, legit old school Dynasty lifers. Okay. And I've won those leagues. I've won several. I have won one GOAT league out of all the GOAT leagues. Now I've got some seconds. I've made plenty of playoff appearances.
You won the big league though.
I did. I'm a bit of a starter.
You're one, actually. Yeah.
I'm money ahead. I won the big money league, the inaugural year. Let's just say I had a little bit of 2 tight end premium experience in my hip pocket, and that definitely helped. Oh, that had hitting on Evan Ingram never hurts as well. So, by the way, this year, Mike Gesicki, this year's Evan Ingram. Tune into the Dynasty War Zone for that.
And Cooper Kupp's MVP season.
Oh yeah, that was true. Yeah, I had Cooper Kupp. That was when Deontay Johnson was still catching touchdowns. Not 2022 Deontay Johnson, but 2021 Deontay Johnson when he was catching. I mean, just an obscene. And Terry McLaurin had a better year that year as well. But so what we're gonna do? I'm going to give Nate a second. Nate, is there any parting words because you don't have anything to promote because you don't create content anymore, but I will say this. Nate is a great follow on Twitter at PalePoly004. I'll tag him in the tweets when we send this thing out. Nate is a great follow, but Nate is a worldly human being. He loves Dynasty Fantasy Football, but he's going to discuss politics. He's going to discuss social matters. He's going to discuss the world of today. So if you want to follow Nate, follow Nate. He is, as my father used to say in honor of Father's Day, Nate's good people and Nate's a good follow. But Nate, what would you want these people to know about you, and how would you like to help them commission their leagues?
Yeah, you know what? So like I said, this has been a while since I've been back onto the podcast, and I don't do content anymore. I've kind of passed that torch to much better people back at the Goat District, and I really don't have anything to add other than what we've covered here from a GM perspective. I think that's the value I think I can at this point. Otherwise, we could talk all day on, like you and I do on the road, about what the latest fantasy news is and how to deal with what and who you're trading. I will talk about that every day. I will do trades for you because I'm such a trade degenerate. It does not have to be my team. I'm happy to do that. But I also like to do trades myself. Yeah, I think the only advice I stuck with is what I started with is don't make more work for yourself. If you're a commish, like you said, we don't want people to leave. The last thing a commissioner wants is more work or grievances to deal with. We just want to be the ones that facilitate things and help the league stay strong and active for our own benefit as much as yours. So my advice to commissioners is to try not to do anything that will create more work for yourself. You don't want to alienate your league mates for whatever reason. Make things a group decision as often as possible. And when you can't compromise, then you have to do what's in the best interest of the league and then hope it works out for the best. So just be a good commish, and you'll have fun along the way. You'll make friends along the way, and you'll enjoy this game as much as everybody else.
I very well said, and again, this is why I bring Nate on. I brought him on for you, to be honest. Hey, that's a lie. I brought him on because he's my buddy, and I like talking fantasy football with him. But I think Nate runs such a unique set of leagues, and he runs them in a way that makes them fun. He is a trade addict. He is a trade machine. He has an addiction. He loves dynasty trades. So if you ever want somebody, and maybe you think that, and we've all got our biases. Now, if you think this Twitter, fantasy content creator has a slant, and you ever just want a neutral down the middle from a guy who literally makes dozens of dynasty trades a week, hit Nate up on Twitter. I'll put his Twitter handle in the show notes. Nate, buddy, I really appreciate you. Now, here's what's going to happen next. Here's what's going to happen next. We're going to end the live stream, but this is why you subscribe to Player Profiler. Later in the week, we're doing a new thing called Overtime. Jerry and I on the Dynasty Warzone last night, we did our Win Now Dynasty trade targets. But then when the live stream ended, we went back in and we went to Overtime, and there will be an additional 2 guys on Win Now teams that we're trading for. You'll have to, if you just subscribe to Player Profiler, you will get all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this stream, and I'm going to go jump on another stream with Nate. You can't watch it live, but you can catch it in the future. I'm going to talk about one fantasy wide receiver that I know I love. I've been talking a ton about. I know Nate loves because Nate rejected him in a trade offer to me just last week. So what we're going to do is we're going to thank you. We're going to thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. We hope we gave you some ideas that will help you keep your dynasty leagues alive, help you replace those orphaned GMs. And until next time here on the Kiss the Ring, thanks for tuning in, and everybody have a great week. I'll see you in 2 weeks from tonight. Thanks, guys.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.